email. Nella prossima settimana il professore Sandro Schipani fa lezione, ma quale lingua lui sarà usare?
Lui userà italiano, io tradurrò in inglese. Già abbiamo organizzato tutto, come il
Ah,
precedente
sì, sì.
anno.
Ok, ok, grazie mille. Ok.
Prego. Ciao.
Prego, prego.
Sì, professore, buonasera.
Eccomi, mi sentite?
Sì, sì,
Sì,
certo.
sì, 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 sì.
Ah,
So,
perfetto.
Sì.
ok. Gender bir buçuk ya. Gender bir buçuk. So,
Fa
gender
niente, fa
gençliği
niente.
değil mi? Hadi. 所以现在我要教授 Aldo Petrucci。我真的感谢 Aldo Petrucci 教授，他是在Università of Pisa，他教罗马法。Aldo Petrucci 他学罗马法，不他也学中国法。我真的感谢 Petrucci 教授，他是我的真的很最命的教授，他也是我的非常好的朋友。我已经告诉他，今天有很多的中国学生和Petrucci 教授，今天他帮助我学罗马法的公式法，所以我真的感谢他。Professore, allora lascio a lei la parola, può anche condividere le slide, l'ho ringraziata appunto pubblicamente dinanzi agli
Sì,
studenti, abbiamo 285 partecipanti.
sì, ma le slide loro le hanno già a disposizione?
No, 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 le può condividere lei da sotto, c'è un'applicazione.
Professore, ce
Sì,
l'abbiamo il slide, sì, sì, perché professore Petrucci mi ha
sì.
mandato, sì, sì. Sì,
Va
sì,
bene,
quindi,
allora io
sì,
posso svolgere il testo della conferenza
sì,
e voi fate vedere le slides.
sì,
Allora le
sì, ok.
faccio vedere io, professore, le inserisco, va bene?
Va bene, allora io comincio.
Va benissimo, grazie.
Nimen Hao. Good evening to everyone. My name is Aldo Petrucci, and the topic of my conference of today is Roman Societas and Modern Companies Models, a comparison between atypical and typical models in the two experiences. It's a commonplace among many modern scholars that the partnership model concluded by consensual contract, Societas, in Roman law was unfit for trade and commercial activities because of three essential weaknesses. The first one is the lack of limited liability. These
萨大学，我是披萨大学。
The first one is the lack of limited liability. The structural weakness compelled the Romans to resort to other devices for developing their economic activities, such as appointing as a manager a co-owned slave and giving him a separate asset in order to limit his owner's liability. A modern scholar writes, the Romans never evolved a legal form for commercial manufacturing enterprises similar to our modern joint stock company, which had the advantage of limiting investors' liability and of preserving the business as a unit beyond the death of its owners. The second weaknesses is the lack of legal personality. A societas formed by a consensual contract was not a legal person different from its members and able to subsist even if they have changed. There is only one kind of partnership in Roman law that appears to have had legal personality, the Societas Vectigalis or Publicanorum, as I told you in a short time. The lack of effect on third parties represents the last weakness. It means that the deals and contracts that one partner made were binding on him alone and not on his partners, since the partnership did not have legal personality. They were not binding on it either. The agreement on which partnership was founded only had effects among the partners, and each third party who concluded a contract with one of them was debtor or creditor to him alone. Therefore, in the opinion of modern scholars, Roman partnership had no particular advantage as a means of structuring a business. But, which were Roman jurists' ideas? If we read their works, collected above all in the digest of Justinian, we may find different kinds of partnership in the frame of a unique model concluded by a consensual contract. Gaius' institutions make a basic distinction between two kinds: partnership formed in all goods and partnership formed in some business. More complete are two quotations of Ulpians. In the first one, he tells, partnerships are formed in all goods or in some business or for the collection of taxes or even in one thing. And in the second text, he says, it is also permissible to form a partnership without specific terms, and the partnership is held to be formed in all that comes in the way of profit. According to his text, a first kind is a partnership formed in all goods that was extended to all assets of partners, including acquisitions by way of inheritance, legacy, and gifts. This is the most ancient one, the origin of which dated back to the consortium, a sort of a partnership among brothers after their father's death, existing at the beginning of Roman law. More than a kind of partnership fit for business, it seems a simple aggregation of partners' property. Another jurist, Paul, in another text in the digest, tells us that the formation of such a partnership needed a specific agreement among its partners. In Ulpian's list, a second type, is the partnership formed in all that comes in the way of profit. That reflects a more commercial approach. The jurist observes that if the scope of the partnership had not been specified, the partners were presumed to have formed this kind of partnership. The questions that Roman jurisprudence has dealt with concern the extent of partners' acquisition. What does it mean, the expression profit here? Ulpian text in digest gives the example of profit deriving from sale or hire in the course of business activities. The following test of Paul adds profit coming from a partner's work. A third kind mentioned by Ulpian is the partnership for the collection of taxes. Its origins dated back to the end of the 3rd century before Christ, when they were known as Societas Publicanorum. During the last 2 centuries of the Roman Republic, 2nd, 1st century before Christ, their scope was much larger because they contracted to the state in order to perform many public duties on the behalf of it, such as making public works, exploiting mines and public land, etc. This kind of partnership had some unusual features. First, it survived the death of one of its members, whereas in the other kinds of partnership, this fact would cause their extinction. It is therefore deemed to have had a sort of legal personality. Second, they had a complex internal structure with different levels of participations of the partners, a general meeting of them, including a smaller and more influent group called decumani, a central manager director, and local manager directors, and one or more partners whose specific task aimed to undertake contracts to the states. In the addition, we find the mention of shares in some Cicero's speeches that belong to private investors who were not partners but received profits from them. Now I invite to go back with the slides because I just ended to speak about the third type of partnership. Now I go on with the first kind of partnership. Okay, and now it's right. The first kind of partnership is the most common one, the partnership to carry on one business. Societas unius negotiationis. It was a means of pooling resources and sharing costs, and it would allow a business to operate using the capital of more than one person. Finally, next slide, please. A last kind in Ulpian's quotation is a partnership formed in one thing, Societas unius rei, where partners' resources, property, and work aimed to a single transaction. Now let's us focus on the partnership to carry on one business. Roman jurists explain us some essential rules concerning all the kinds of partnerships, but their discussions are above all focused on the partnership to carry on one business, considered as a general model where the agreement between partners played a central role. Let us analyze just 2 points. The first one, contributions and relations between partners. To understand the increasing importance of partners' agreement in adapting the general model to their concrete needs, we have to move from the well-known text of Gaius Institutes, the one you can see in our slide. Gaius says, there was a great discussion whether one partner could receive a greater share in the profit than he did in the loss. A jurist called Quintus Mucius said no. Another jurist, Servius, however, said yes. It is possible to have even a partnership where one partner shares only in the profit but not in the loss, as long as his work is regarded as so valuable that it is fair that he should be admitted to partnership on such terms. It is established that it is possible to have a partnership in which one contributes money and the other does not, yet the profit is shared. Often the work of one is as valuable as money. As modern scholars underline, this passage allows us to disclose a fundamental historical development in Roman law of partnership. The first jurist quoted, Mucius, had an approach probably remained influenced by a structure of ancient partnership formed in all assets of the partners, so that, according to his view, there would need to be equality in terms of property contributed and profit derived from it, and there would be no scope for taking account of work done by one of the partners. Maybe we must go back to a former slide, the former one. Okay, I am commenting this test. I am explaining it. So, in the view of Servius' thought, it was reflected a more commercial approach in the way the partners could have chosen to mold the contract of partnership to their actual purposes. In such a perspective, we may understand that contributions in terms of work may be as valuable as those in money, and that partners may agree upon different shares in profit and loss, and upon a wider assessment of the relative contributions of the partners. Of course, the assessment of work could be made in terms of material value and according to the real needs of the partnership. So, Gaius' testimony allows us to follow the increasing role of the partners' freedom of contract in these matters during the 1st century before Christ. It was left to their agreement. So the next slide, please. The next one. Thank you. It was left to their agreement if contributions had to be in money, assets, or work, if shares in profits and losses had to correspond to partners' contributions, and if their shares had to be equal or they could be different, with the only exception for the prohibition of the so-called lion partnership, Societas leonina, sharing in losses, but not in profits. Next one, please. Duration. Partnership in Roman law needed the partner's permanent consent. When their consent anyway ceased to be present, the relationship terminated. Roman jurists of the second and of the beginning of the 3rd century Annus Domini inform us that the partnership was dissolved by changes in persons if one of the partners changed in his civil status, for example, becoming a slave, or by his death, or by their free choice. Which was the impact of partners' agreement on these causes of termination of the partnership? Could it avoid such an effect? In case of death or change in civil status of a partner, legal data offer us concrete solutions advanced by Roman jurisprudence. Since partnership was a consensual contract based on partners' consent, they could immediately decide to form a new one with the partner's heir or with the same partner whose civil status had changed. Legally, there were two different partnerships, the dissolved one and the new formed one, but as refers to efficiency, there was no break in business activities. We also know that in Roman law, it was recognized the partner's free choice to terminate the partnership when the contract did not fix a time limit for its duration. It was correctly pointed out that it was quite unsatisfactory when trying to run a business that it should be based on a relationship which may terminate at least opportune moment, with the need to divide property and the risk that the whole enterprise will suddenly and without warning become undercapitalized. Even for this cause of termination, Roman jurists have suggested solutions in order to neutralize unpleasant consequences. If the partnership contract established a time limit, a partner's renunciation before it, lacking a justa causa, allowed the other on the others to sue him for damages. Otherwise, in case that the partnership agreement did not contain anything thereon, a partner's withdrawal contrary to good faith and fair dealing on which the partnership contract was based made the renouncing member liable for damages. Let's now analyze special rules for partnerships related to banking and slaving trade. The next one, please. The next one, please. Okay. In the framework of partnership to carry on one business, there are some special models that are worth considering briefly because they were exceptions to the ordinary rule that the acts of one partner partner to third parties had no effects on the other partner or partners. The next one, please.
同学们把话筒都关一下。
No, the former one. I beg your pardon. Okay. I'm talking about this kind of partnership between bankers. One case is the partnership between bankers. As modern scholars have observed since a long time, there were formed special rules of law by means of which a contract made by one partner in the bank was regarded as made by all the partners. Therefore, for example, if the banker that have concluded a contract had become debtor, his creditor could have claimed the sum of money in full, of course only once, to any of the other partners. At the same time, if the banker contracting had become creditor, even his partner or partners in the bank could have claimed the sum in full to his debtor. Here, we may find a relevant exception to the general rule that a contracting partner created an obligation only between himself and the third party. The most accepted explanation thereof is the possibility for bankers or their creditors to claim repayment when the partners in the bank were located in different places. Next one, please. As concerns the second case, partnership between slave dealers, we may observe that they normally form a partnership on the basis that whatever they do it for the common purposes of the partnership. The consequence was that Roman magistrates charged with the control of the transactions in markets introduced the appropriate remedies in their edicts in order to protect buyers in case of hidden vices of slaves that dealers had not stated at the moment of the conclusion of the purchase contract. According to what the jurist Paul in a text of the Digest tells us, these remedies were available not only against the partner who concluded the contract, but also against any other partner who had a share in the partnership equal or greater than the partner's one. By this way, the buyer was not compelled to sue the partner who had been his contracting party, whereas he was allowed to file for his claims another partner as long as his share in business was equal or greater. The ground thereof depended on the bad reputation of such kind of traders that were often inclined to a dishonest profit. Next one, please. A partnership to carry on one business might be organized by partners by appointing an agent working as a manager. The act of appointing was called praepositio, while the business agent denomination for land and trade activities was institutor, and for sea trade, magister navis. Agents might have been one of the partners, or more commonly, their co-owned slave, but the legal outcomes of the partnership activities were the same. By choosing this kind of organization, contracts concluded by the appointed agent had effects on all partners' liability. In the text of the jurist Ulpian, we may find two relevant examples. The first one concerns a business carried on by two or more partners by appointing a co-owner slave, but in unequal shares as their agent. The legal problem was to ascertain the extent of the partner's liability to the creditors for the contracts concluded by the agent and not performed by him. The solution was given by the jurist Julian, whose opinion was reminded and accepted even by Ulpian. A creditor could sue either of the owners and partners for the whole amount. As a modern scholar correctly underlines, the third party need not take any interest in what the respective shares of the owners and partners are in the slave or goods. He can sue one for the whole. Of course, the partner who had paid could have claimed to the other or others their corresponding share in losses by means of appropriate remedies. The second example exposed by Ulpian is related to sea trade carried on by two or more partners by appointing one of them as ship agent. As far as regards all partners' liability for contracts concluded by him and not performed, the legal solution was identical to that we have just considered in the first example. Creditors could sue each partner for the whole amount. General remarks on the model of partnership in Roman law. I think it's the next slide. Although all partnerships were formed by the conclusion of a typical consensual contract, there might be distinguished different kinds deriving from business practices with different scopes, structures, and legal disciplines. Roman jurists tried to offer classifications thereon, but they were conscious of the impossibility to place in a strict legal frameworks a more complex and rich reality. All the models of partnership were extremely flexible by the way of partners' agreement in order to respond to economic needs of the Roman world. Two different models could also be combined according to concrete exigencies. Some models have developed their own legal regimes on the organization of structural features of the partnership, its duration and effects of its contracts on third parties. Finally, if modern scholars may discuss about the suitability of these models for commercial and mercantile activities, Roman jurists and businessmen had no doubt in regarding them as completely fit. Next one. Next one. Thank you. If now we consider a short overlook on partnership model in the late Middle Age, in the lex mercatoria of late Middle Age, we can say that between the 12th and the 15th century, Western European countries developed a new mercantile society based on business, trades, and production, giving birth to a new special branch of the legal system called lex mercatoria. It was created by merchants in their reciprocal business relations and then extended also to common people who had transactions with them. All the disputes thereon were judged by merchants. For a long time, until the formation of modern European states, public authorities did not intervene in its creation and enforcement. In the framework of this new branch, two main partnership models appear to be used. I think it's the next one. The partnership in commendam, named commenda, A, and B, company partnership compagnia. Their structure and characters were rather different. We may resume them as follows. Next one. The partnership in commenda, presented a very deep separation between capitalists and merchants. A capitalist granted a merchant money or goods for his sea trade or land trade activities. The merchant used them to carry on his business and proceeded to the distribution of profit, commonly third of it to the capitalist and one-third to himself, only in case of a safe journey. Risks for the capitalist were limited only to the loss of his money or goods lent to the merchant, whereas the latter was charged with unlimited liability to third contracting parties for unperformed contracts. Next one. The company partnership, compagnia, was born within great business families as a way to carry out transactions on the behalf of the whole family. This explains why there was a joint management and administration of business by all the male members of the same family, and why its structure was normally divided in a central seat and in more local branches. All the partners bore a joint and unlimited liability for partnership obligations, and the bankruptcy of one partner extended to all. As we can see, both models were deemed fit for business need. Next one, please. Their fundamental difference concerned limited or unlimited liability and managing structure. Both inherited some features from Roman law, but developed them in a new way according to the commercial relations of their age. Let's now consider modern times. During the 17th and the 18th century, we assist to two fundamental changes related to the law of partnership. The first one is the birth of a new model of partnership, the anonymous company. And the second one is the state control on trade and business activities. These two elements are tied each other. Next one. The anonymous company represents the most ancient form of our actual joint stock companies. It derives from the great colonial companies for Eastern India or Western India, and its main, they were founded in the Netherlands, England, or France by grant of a royal authorization. As you can see, the most important features they had were limited liability for all partners and division of the company capital into shares negotiable by external investors. The next one, please. The state, the new formed state authorities in Europe controlled trade and business activities by granting anonymous companies a royal authorization to carry on their activities, and by legally regulating all the models of partnership. The most known example are the Ordinance on the land and trade and sea trade of the King Louis the 14th of France in 1673 and 1681. Next one, please. Carry on trade and business activities was therefore a privilege granted by the king. Each merchant had to be registered in his guild, and each contract of partnership of whatever type had to be in written form and registered in records kept by public authorities. Each partnership had to keep a regular and a clear accountability. Next one. The following step was that if more persons wanted to enter trade or business activities, they had to choose a type, a model, regulated and allowed by national legal systems. The first one was the French Code of Commerce of 1807. And in it, there were only 3 types of companies. It was therefore possible for partners to choose only one of them. The first one was a partnership in joint name that was the modern evolution of company partnership. The second one was the commended partnership that was the evolution of the partnership in commenda of the late Middle Age. And the third one was the anonymous partnership that needed state authorization, and in France, state authorization was necessary until 1867. Next one. The need to choose a legal type to form a partnership had a basic aim. And this aim was having definite rules in order to control the formal fairness of the business carried on, and by consequence to protect the rights of partners and third parties. Next one. The same way was followed by the other European countries that included and regulated in their commercial or civil codes, as is the case of Italy, of 19th and 17th century, the only kinds of partnership which partners might have chosen to form a partnership or a company. Next one. So we may see an evident contradiction between two fundamental principles belonging to the liberal society of Europe of the last 2 centuries and legal rules on partnership and companies. On the one hand, the proclaimed freedom of economic activities and freedom of contract. On the other hand, need to choose a legal type and impossibility to create a different one. Next one. Let's end our speech with an overlook about the actual situation. I may only refer to the Italian legal system, but many rules are common to the other European countries because of their origin from the European Union. Next one. If we limit our speech to profit-seeking partnerships in the contemporary Italian legal system, we may basically find seven types, 6 of domestic origin. The most important are limited company and joint stock company, and 1, the so-called European Partnership, introduced in 2003 by European rules. We can widely realize how great barriers the partners' autonomy still finds when they want to form a partnership. But global economy, worldwide trade and business, international competition cannot admit such barriers that are considered as a legacy of a stricter state control and as a huge obstacle to commercial relations. By consequence, the Italian legal system has adopted 2 different strategies. The first one, allowing the partners to add many atypical clauses to legal types. Second, dividing the legal types in many subtypes in the framework of joint stock companies, for example, Partners may form listed or non-listed joint stock companies, or it may be formed a one partner joint stock company. As a subtypes of a limited company, there are provided startup companies, one partner limited companies, simplified limited companies, etc. Some final reflections. Finally, let us compare Roman solution and modern solutions. Roman law created one general model of partnership through a typical consensual contract that traders and businessmen could conclude for their economic needs and activities. This general model was very flexible according to the partners' agreements and could aim to whatever purpose. Business practice molded different kinds of partnerships and different kinds of partnerships, and only little by little the legal science tried to make a systematic classification without any presumption to be rigid and compulsory. The great importance given to the partners' autonomy allowed them to combine two or eventually more models of partnership, and public authorities did not impose a choice among legal types. Having to balance the two opposite exigencies, the provision of legal types of partnership and their rules to protect partners and third parties and the partners' autonomy for their economic purposes, modern legal systems go on imposing legal types, but correct them, introducing many subtypes and giving partners a wide freedom to introduce atypical clauses in the legal types. Thank you very much for your attention.
Il professore mi sente?
Sì, bene.
Ecco, allora un attimo. Senta, professore, una gentilezza. E prima di chiudere, diciamo, il collegamento, e solitamente io sono solito fare un po' una carrellata di quello che è stato detto. Lei sarebbe
Certo.
disponibile un attimo per gentilezza, perché vengono dette, diciamo, cose molto importanti e per tutti i partecipanti è una occasione unica questa. Quindi riprendo un attimo.
Sì, Enrico, è come ha fatto l'anno scorso, per me va benissimo.
Grazie, lei è gentilissimo, io non voglio abusare della sua disponibilità, però non capita spesso, quindi la ringrazio. Casomai se lei mi suggerisce pure dove posso correre, c'è la condivisione dello schermo ora? Tornata?
Sì, no, io vedo perfettamente le slides, quindi per me quella è
Perfetto.
la cosa più importante.
Ok, allora lei mi dica, ecco, da dove vogliamo, quando io vado avanti, lei mi dica, mi dia un segnale, io vado avanti. Ecco.
No, può procedere, tanto man mano, come dire, lo scheletro sono state le slides e poi io mi sono qua e là ampliato sulle varie cose, quindi vada secondo l'ordine che le sembra quello più adatto per il pubblico.
Partiamo da questa, allora, diciamo, dalla prima,
Sì,
professore.
sì, perché su questa può insistere il fatto che è un po' la visione che hanno gli analisti economici del diritto, cioè quando analizzano la società romana, diciamo così, sottolineano la sua inadeguatezza per la attività di business per queste tre fondamentali debolezze. Quindi può cominciare con questo, perché poi alla fine tutto il discorso è di far vedere che intanto non sono diciamo, debolezze vere e proprie come le vedono loro, perché comunque il discorso va un pochino più contestualizzato e comunque ci sono soluzioni che portano alla responsabilità limitata, ci sono soluzioni che portano a delle forme di autonomia e in un caso, quello della società dei pubblicani, quasi un riconoscimento, una personalità giuridica, e poi ci sono dei sistemi o per certi tipi di società o con la nomina dello, diciamo così, dello schiavo comune che svolgeva le attività contrattuali di produrre effetti sulle terze parti. Quindi diciamo queste tre debolezze in fondo non sono le cose così vere, così come poi alla fine, diciamo così, non c'era una rigidità di tipi, ma c'era una grande elasticità e flessibilità che consentiva ai partners con tutta una serie di accordi interni di venire incontro alle loro esigenze. Questo direi che è il messaggio più forte dell'eredità romana.
What Petrucci, professor, wanted to underline, now we are arranging a very short brainstorming about the lesson of Professor Petrucci, and I wanted to underline here the lack of limited liability and the lack of legal personality and the lack of effect on the third parties. And it's for this kind of reason that in the opinion of modern scholars, partnership in Roman law had no particular advantage as means of structuring its business. For this kind of reason, for the lack of a limited liability, legal personality, and effect on the third part. And as here, we can here underline and read when we talk about the Roman partnership model and type, we must to refer to the text of Roman law. We may find a different type of a partnership, but always in the frame of a unique model concluded by, and this is very important, consensual contract. And so we refer to Ulpian, and here we can find the definition, and in the digest is the second passage. And so here is very important just to understand the different type. The first type is the partnership formed in all goods. And please do not forget the Latin name that is Societas Omnium Bonorum. And it extended to all assets of partners, also including acquisition by way of inheritance, legacy, and gift. So it's very important just to remember that all assets of partners and not fit for business, but this is a simple aggregation of a partner's property. And a second type of a partnership is the partnership formed in all that comes in the way of profit. And here, please write the Latin name that is the Societas Universorum quae ex questu veniunt. And here in this second type, you can find a more commercial approach. Then we have a third type of partnership, that is the partnership for all the collection of taxes, Societas vertigalis or publicanorum. And it's important just to remember that this kind of partnership had a number of unusual features. The fourth type of a partnership that is the most commonly used one is the partnership to carry on one business. And this kind of partnership was a means of pooling resources and sharing cost, and it would allow a business to operate using the capital of more than one person. And then the fifth type is a partnership formed in one thing, Societas Unius Rei, where partners' resource, property, and work were aimed to a single transaction. So here we can see that we can find 5 different types of partnership. And all the Roman jurists show us the essential legal rules concerning the general model of a partnership and all its types. And so let's us focus on 2 points. The first one is the contribution and the relations between the different partners. And here is very important just to remember this part of Gaius Institute. And then we can remember that the increasing role of the party in the freedom of contract in these matters. So it's very important to remember that the direction is that the increasing of freedom in this kind of matters. And it's for this kind of reason that it was left to the partners' agreement if contribution had to be in money, asset, or work, if shares in profit and losses had to correspond to partner contribution, and if their shares in profit and losses had to be equal or they could be different except for the Lions partnership. So the direction is the direction of increasing of freedom. About the duration, the partnership in Roman law needed permanent consent. When consent anyway ceased to be present, the relation terminated. So here we can also focus on a second point that is the consent among parties. And Ulpian here informs us that the partnership was dissolved by change in person if one of the partners changed in his civil status or by his death or by their free choice. So we can state that there are 2 pillars. One is the freedom and the second one is the consent. What about the impact of a partner's agreement on these causes of termination of the partnership? The first one is the death and the change in civil status of partners. And then a partner's free choice to terminate the partnership. Within the type of partnership to carry on one business, there are special cases that are worth looking briefly because they are exception. This is very important to remember that these are exception to the ordinary rules that the act of one partner have no effect on the other partner or partners. So here we can remember the partnership between bankers, that is the Societas Argentaria, the partners between slave dealers, Societas Venaliciaria, and then we have the type of partnership to carry on one business may be organized by partners by appointing an agent for land, trade, activities, or for sea trade commerce. So at the same time, we can see that the company law in the Roman law is quite complex. And what about some general conclusion on the model of the partnership in Roman law? Although the partnerships were formed by the conclusion of a consensual contract, in here I wanted to underline the consent of the party, there was not a unique type, but there might be distinguished different type deriving from business practice with different scope, structure, and legal disciplines. And the jurists tried to offer the classification, but they were conscious of the impossibility to place in strict legal frameworks a more complex and rich reality. So what we must remember that the reality of the partnership in the Roman law is quite complex. And also for the jurists, it was not so easy just to place in a legal, in a strict legal framework, just to organize this complex and rich reality. And all the types of a partnership were extremely flexible by the way of partners' agreement in order to respond to economic needs of the Roman world. Here, I think that is very important also here to underline that there were a lot of party agreements, but in order to respond to the reality of the Roman world. So now, finally, if modern scholars may discuss about the suitability of this type for commercial and mercantile activity for the Roman jurists and professionals, they looked completely fit. Now, here we go ahead, and so we have a short overlook on a partnership model in the Lex Mercatoria of the late Middle Age. It's very important here just to remember how Professor Petrucci he started from the Roman law, and now we are in the little Middle Age. So there is always a chronological link in the different slides. And between the 12th and the 15th century in Europe, we have a new mercantile society based on business, trade, and production. And this developed a new specific legal system that is Lex Mercatoria, that was created by merchants, direct and merchants and the people who traded with them, enforced by merchants as judges. And in the framework of this new legal system, merchants developed the two main partnership model, commanded partnership and company partnership. Then, what about the modern times that we are always nearly to the modern times? During the 17th and 18th century, we assisted to fundamental changes. The birth of a new model of a partnership, the anonymous company, and the state control on the trade and the business activity. And these two elements are tied each other. So it's very important here to see, to underline, to remember that during the modern times we assisted to fundamental change. So as I told you, the anonymous company and the state control the trade and the business activity. And now it's very important just to have a comparative approach, because in the French Code of Commerce of 1807, we just have only three types: the partnership in joint name, the modern evolution of company partnership, the commanded partnership, and anonymous partnership that needed the state authorization until 1867. And the need to choose a legal type to form a partnership has had a basic aim. At the same time, having definite rules in order to control the formal fairness of the business carried on and by consequent to protect the right of partners and third parties. And the same way was followed by other European countries that included and regulated in their commercial or civil code of 19th and 20th century the only times which partners might have chosen to form a partnership or a company. So here we reach the conclusion. And so we may see an evident contradiction between two fundamental principles belonging to the liberal society of Europe of the last 2 centuries and the legal rules on partnership and companies. On the one hand, the freedom of economic activities and the freedom of contract. On the other hand, the need to choose a legal type and the impossibility to create a different one. So now another look about the actual situation. The Professor Petrucci mainly referred to the Italian legal system, but many rules, and this is very important, many rules are common to the European country because of their origin from the European Union. And if the limit of our speech to profit, seeking partnership in the contemporary Italian legal system, we may basically find 7 types, 6 of domestic origin and 1 introduced in 2003 by rules of the European Union. We can widely perceive that the partner's autonomy still finds the barrier in the need to choose a legal type in order to form a partnership. And this is important because the global economy, world, wide international trades and business, international competition cannot stand such barriers that are considered as a legacy of a more strict state control. So by consequence, Italian legal system has adopted 2 different strategies, allowing many atypical clauses to add to legal types and dividing the legal types in many subtypes. I think that is very important just to understand how the Italian legislator found or adopted a different strategies. This is very important, just to better fit the legal approach to the reality and to the needs. So, just at the final reflection, I want to sum up the final reflection of Professor Petrucci. Roman law created one consensual contract, Societas, that traders and businessmen could use to form a partnership for their economic needs and activities. This general model was very flexible and could be directed at whatever purpose. Practice molded different types, and only little by little the legal science tried to make a systematic classification without any presumption to be rigid and compulsory. Great importance was given to the partner's autonomy that could also combine more types, and the state had no claim to impose a legal type to them. What about the nowadays solution? Modern legal system having to balance two opposite needs: the respect of legal types of partnership and partners' autonomy for economic needs, to go on imposing legal types, but at the same time correct them, introducing many subtypes and giving partners a wider freedom to introduce atypical clauses in legal types. So here it's very important that we can state that we have an hardware that is fixed and a software that give us the opportunity just to introduce some different type of atypical clause, but in legal types. Professore?
Sì.
Eccoci.
Perfetto.
Guardi, io la ringrazio davvero. Lei è sempre disponibile, è stata una lezione sempre molto importante. Non so se vuole lasciare qualche parola di ringraziamento agli studenti, allora.
Va bene, li posso ringraziare per aver avuto la pazienza di sentirmi e che spero di vederli di persona un giorno.
Sì, professore, anche la ringrazio a lei perché professore Huang Feng anche saluto a lei perché professore Huang Feng c'è un'altra appuntamento stasera, quindi lui non si può partecipare a questo corso, ma lui ha salutato a lei.
Grazie, ricambio con tanto affetto i saluti del professor Huang Feng e ringrazio tutti i partecipanti, studenti, studentesse cinesi per aver avuto la pazienza di ascoltare la mia conferenza. Grazie veramente.
Grazie a lei.
So thanks a lot to Professor Petrucci, and thanks to all the students for participating. Really, believe me, I'm doing my best to share our knowledge about Roman law with you, and what I wanted to transfer to you that is very important, the knowledge of the Roman law, because the Roman law is the key just to better understand the law of our country. So thanks a lot. Now have a nice evening, a nice weekend, and we see next week with the Professor Sandro Schipani. Thanks a lot to everybody. Bye.
Bye bye.
Ciao.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Ciao.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Ciao.